I'm ready to do it, I can't be afraid.
All right, this is Chris Jones with Urban Link Media, and this is Shane Hall. We're getting ready to hop into another episode, and Shane had a couple questions for me. What's up, man?
Man, we were on a call the other day, and it just hit me that your philosophy on starting out and leveling up, like, it was so excellent. So can you just tell everybody, what is your philosophy of starting, and what is your philosophy of leveling up as an entrepreneur?
Absolutely. That's a really great question. And I get that all the time. The big thing for me is you got to nut up and you got to get after it, right? There's no such thing as sitting around hoping that something's going to get done. If you want to be an entrepreneur and you want to make a name for yourself, then you got to put in the elbow grease in the beginning. Like that, there's nothing else you can do, all right?
But is that the Marine in you? Is that the former athlete in you? Or is that the business in you?
You can't get anything done in life unless you take action. Right? And so many people get stuck, frozen, not taking that action. And that hurts them. And then they look back and they're like, man, I wish I would have done, right? It's like that old high school football syndrome, right? Oh my God, I just sat with my buddy and he told me for an hour how great he was, right? But if I just would have worked out a little bit harder,
would have played college ball,
all pro, I would have been professional,
all American, college, yeah.
That's really great, but you didn't.
So
Look forward and freaking grind. If that's what you want to do, you get it and you get it done.
Easier said than done from a successful person like you. But what happens when that person makes that leap and they run into that? What is a calculated way to overcome that hurdle? Because so many people, you and I both know, they go after it and then they hit a wall and it's uncomfortable. What is a seed you planted in yourself to overcome that obstacle?
I didn't personally plant any seed for myself. I struggled with a variety of different things as a child, one of which was education. So when I walked into the workforce, I was full of spit and vinegar because I had something to prove, and it wasn't to anybody else. It was just to myself.
What do you mean education?
Well, I just generally struggled in school, as a young child. I eventually figured it out, but, just kind of generally, I had a chip on my shoulder. I think that's a real easy way to put it.
That's so interesting. See, average student as well, huh? I found my high school transcripts after, I'm talking like 4 years ago. I have no idea how I still have them. Definitely C average in high school. But then in college, I learned a lot about myself. And in business, a lot of those C's didn't really matter. What did you discover was different later on in your entrepreneurial career? That the education, that high school stuff didn't matter?
It's not even about the high school stuff. It's about learning how to learn, right? And what I really eventually learned actually through the military, because you said, well, what about the military? Is that the military in you? And to some degree it is, because I learned organizational structure. I learned how to tackle smaller blocks of things and look at that as a success or failure and then modify my behavior as I go, right? And so, I combine that with me absolutely wanting to prove to my dad and everybody freaking else that I could be successful.
That the chip on your shoulder, it's so interesting because you've interviewed a lot of entrepreneurs and we've interviewed a lot of entrepreneurs. How often do you see that as a very key indicator of success?
Look, I got buddies who coach college football, right? I told you just a few hours ago. They say that one of the number one indicators of a successful athlete is that chip on their shoulder. They have something to prove, and it isn't to anybody else, it's to themselves. Okay, so I think it's huge, right? So you need to look yourself in the mirror every morning when you get up and you need to say, did I accomplish what I set out to accomplish yesterday? And how am I going to correct it if I didn't?
Now, okay, so let's say you're successful, and you're talking about sports. There's some of these athletes that are accomplished, and there's some of these entrepreneurial individuals that are exceeding what they would ever thought. And they're sitting there and they're maybe at that six-figure threshold or whatever, $1 million threshold, wherever they're at. How do you kind of check yourself? How do you find that to reinvigorate yourself? Because you're in a spot that you are successful. You can walk away into the sunset right now, but how are you reinvigorating yourself?
Well, let's be honest. Everybody levels out, right? Like the classic weightlifter syndrome. You get up to that point and then you plateau, and then it's how you push through that, right? So I think it's really going back to the roots, right? For me, it was I had a chip on my shoulder and I wanted to get it done, right? And so I would just say that you every day have to look at yourself as an iterative improvement, and you need to look at those mid and long-term goals and say, did I do it or did I not? And you know what? Telling yourself, oh, it's okay, and accepting second or third place is exactly how you end up in fifth. right? Like, let's just be honest, right? So it's those micro improvements that you can do, right? But I'll tell you, with regard to leveling up, as you begin to develop as a professional, as an entrepreneur, you get to a point where you have to shift your mindset, right? And your mindset needs to expand. One of the biggest lessons that I learned in business was through one conversation. I was sitting down with the guy at dinner. It was an entire group of very successful entrepreneurs. At the time, I thought, how the hell did I even end up at this table, right? But he took an interest in me for whatever reason. He said a couple lines, and those couple lines stuck with me to the point where I actually took action based upon them.
What were those? What were those lines?
Absolutely. Those lines were, what do you want to do? Like, what do you want to accomplish with your business? That was the first one. And I said, well, I'd like to make $1 million. And he goes, okay, what does that mean? Does that mean $1 million of revenue, net profit? What does it mean? I said, well, I think it means, I really kind of stuttered. What does that mean? It means I'd like to make $1 million in a year, right? And he goes, okay, well, you're missing a few steps, right? Anybody can make $1 million, but if you're not profitable at $1 million, is it really worth it? What's the future plan? Whatever, right? And I'm like, okay, that makes sense, right? But he said something that was really fundamental, and it was, look, if you're in business, what's an indicator of awareness, right? What is an indicator? And I'm like, what is he talking about? But what he said to me next was really powerful. He's like, awareness is everything. So the indicator of awareness is people's interest in buying whatever goods or services that you're selling, right? So if you're trying to drive and achieve this larger objective, then you need to look at revenue.
Yeah.
What do you want to do? And so I took that same number out of kind of being naive and said, well, I want to do $1 million a month, right?
Yeah.
It's like, and he's like, okay, that's awesome.
Now, did that also help you realize that you were in the right vessel? Because so many times you have a conversation with someone or an entrepreneur and they're like, I want to make X amount of dollars, right? But they're not in a vessel that even scales to that point. Did that allow you to look at, I believe it's the biologics field, right? Did it allow you to look at it and realize, oh, I am in the right spot?
No, absolutely not.
Really? Okay.
No. What it did was made me go, holy shit, I affirmed for myself that I needed to make $1 million in a month. Right?
Yeah.
And then he had this really cool watch, and he had this big story behind it. It was a U-boat watch, really fancy. I love watches, right? And he basically said, what are you going to do for yourself when you hit that, right? And that really goes back to that thing. Like, as an entrepreneur, nobody, and I mean nobody's going to pat you on the back and say, hey, dude, you did a really good job. That's just not going to happen. And you want it to. Like, you want your employees to, but they're like, come on.
In the higher up you
what
go,
are we
the
going to
less
do
people
now?
you can complain to, or the less people are going to pat on
You're getting
your back.
complained about because you're driving people too hard sometimes.
Yeah, right?
So, but yeah, so he's like, what are you going to do for yourself? And I'm like, I'm going to buy one of those U-boat watches. So the first time I made $1 million in a month, guess what I did? I bought one of those U-boat watches. Now, I guess 3 months later, we had some contractors and different folks in the house, and somebody stole that watch, and I didn't have it insured. So that was a big lesson, yeah. But that also taught me something very valuable, right? That was a milestone thing I bought because I proved something, and it gave me the self-recognition that I needed personally, right? And then when I lost it, it made me really think about material possessions differently. And
what now? How did you start looking at material possessions after that point forward?
That it's a game. I started looking at money in general as a game, right? No different than playing Monopoly or playing any sort of other board game where you're bartering, trading, selling, doing whatever, right? All of us come with unique value. How do we leverage that value and provide value back to other people? That's what it's all about as an entrepreneur. So what I looked at when I lost that watch was that concept, and I said, you know what? Money doesn't matter. Material things don't matter, right? They really don't matter. Now the value of that for me was no different than the trophy or the medal that people keep, right? I'm in the military. I got a military service medals, right? Those are important to me. I got them framed in a box. But does that have any monetary value? No.
But but it's more valuable than
right.
Some of the other aspects.
Right.
Of life.
So I would tell you, but then it was like, okay, what am I going to do next? And it wasn't $1 million. Now I'm thinking bigger. So what he did for me was he opened up my mind to realize that there is potential so far beyond what I ever even imagined was possible. And when you are able to really capture that stuff, then you're able to really look at it from a different lens.
Yeah.
No different. I had another gentleman that I'm very good friends with look at me one day and he goes, so you call yourself what at your job? And I'm like, why did you say job? I own my business. And he goes, well, you treat yourself like an employee. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And he goes, well, what's your title? What's your value at the company? Mind-boggling, right? I'm
Yeah,
like,
because you had never
what
sat
do you
there
mean?
and
I never really
defined
thought
that.
I was just hustling, right?
Yeah.
And so ultimately, he's like, you're the CEO. You're a chief executive officer. You got to own that. You got to put that on your LinkedIn. You got to shout that out, right? You got to do all these things. And that was really uncomfortable for me because I had this group mentality kind of belief, and I still maintain that belief, right? But I am a leader, and I need to be able to acknowledge the fact that I'm a leader. So I went ahead and I made that leap, and I said, you know what, you're right. I am a chief executive officer. I own a biotech company, for God's sakes. I do all these. I own a marketing agency. I am that. So
How uncomfortable was that, though?
it was
initially?
extremely uncomfortable. But you know what happened? I put that CEO, and then I put a list of my, what I did on my LinkedIn page, and it's kind of earlier in the LinkedIn days, right? But I started getting messaged from people at that caliber. Right.
That's
and then we
interesting.
started interacting. There were deals that were made. I met with physicians for the core business that I was working in at the time, and those people saw me differently. They literally saw me differently. But most important, I saw myself different.
Yeah.
So I would say as an entrepreneur, you dive into it, right? I say there's nothing better than just good old elbow grease. There just isn't, right?
But there's also something to the classic Jim Carrey writing a check to himself. Was it for like $1 million or $10 million? And he put an expectation that he was going to cash that check when he equaled that amount. And so setting an expectation for yourself, vocalizing it like you did as a CEO, even though it was uncomfortable, setting a reward and then willing to grind to hit it is just a simple process that a lot of people struggle with.
Right. So a lot of times happens, right, when you got the mentality, I'm a driver, right? So I'm like, go, 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 go. We'll figure it out. We'll put the right pieces in place, and we'll move. At some point, you hit that kind of that plateau we're talking about, that level up, and it's just like that song. You got to level up. You're there, get it done, right? Mm-hmm. So now the mindset has to shift from, hey, now I've built something that's got value. I've put the sweat in. Now, how do I look at this thing differently? How do I leverage what I have to amplify the opportunity, right? How much more money do I put into the marketing budget? How much do I allocate of my time versus outsourced time? What is the value of my time respective to what you're making?
And
So
on
it's
top
really
of that,
important.
spending time looking at that. A lot of people don't allocate time. And I'll ask you, do you see this as well, where people don't spend time with themselves and think about where they should put their time? The marketing budgets, really kind of do an audit on it.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's a realignment that has to occur at some point once you kind of hit that point where you need to start looking at your business and approaching it different, right? And a big portion of that is learning, right? So I invested a lot of time up front learning, and then that learning got me so far.
Describe that. Come back to that.
Yeah.
What did you, describe the learning, describe what you mean by investing up front into learning.
Yeah, so, if you're trying to do, I don't care what it is, right? You're doing an e-commerce business. We work with a lot of e-commerce people in the digital marketing space, right? They need to learn how to use Shopify, how to build a right website, how to create lead funnels, how to do all these things, right? If you're going to do it at the beginning, most of the time people are having to do it themselves. And the thing about that's so great is you actually learn the fundamentals. So later when you hire it out, or later whether it's to an agency like us, or whether you work with an inside team, you understand it so you can manage it more efficiently.
Yeah.
Right?
Is that education happening? When
It
is that
happens
education
along the way, but you can't freeze in it.
Okay.
Right. So you have to take time. You have to learn what you need to learn, and you got to move into the project. And then you're going to learn the hard way. You're going to make mistakes. That shit happens. You just take it with a grain of salt, and you march forward.
Why do you feel that some entrepreneurs forgive themselves and some people hold on to it? I mean, I'm a strong believer in I screw up a lot. I make a lot of mistakes. And for some reason, I'm just like, okay, I forgive myself. And the moment I forgive myself on a business transaction and move forward, but there's some people, why do you think some hold on to that mistake and they're frozen and they're timid?
Yeah, so I look at it, I'm full of spit and vinegar, right? Like that's just my personality. So if you look at a situation where I screwed up, I'm hypercritical on myself because you know what? It's your damn fault. I don't care whether an employee screwed it up. I don't care. you're the one responsible for it. I don't even care if you've got a manager underneath you that screwed up. That's also your fault because you.
Nope. Now you're taking ownership. No one wants to do that.
No, it's important. It's important because you need to, right? This goes back to that chip on a shoulder.
Right.
But you have to take action. You have to acknowledge the fault. You have to address it, and you got to move forward knowing what you just made a mistake on, right? Like, that's it. You just have to say, I made a mistake. I'm not letting that shit go, because the minute I let that go, it happens again somewhere else. So for me, I always remember that, and it burns a little tattoo in me. And I'm just like, okay, I fucked that up. I'm not going to do it again. And now I'm better for it. So that learning lesson allowed me to level up.
So, okay, so you're saying you hold on to it, you let it burn, and then you're like, okay, cool, time to go forward and with positive action.
Positive action, but always remember that scar, right?
Okay.
Think of it like a scar on your face.
Man, I'm surprised I'm not scarred up more. Awesome. Well, dude, I appreciate this, because earlier we were talking, you were dropping this wisdom, these knowledge bombs and everything, and this is just the kind of stuff that if I was to go back to 20-year-old Shane, and also right now in my life, these are the type of things that we always need to constantly remind ourselves. All the things you're saying, whether you're starting out or whether you're accelerating, whether you're an athlete, a high school athlete, college athlete, young entrepreneur, male, female, anything. Even the best part is all the things you're saying, as you and I have some high-level friends, they say it more than even the people starting out.
Look, there's two types of entrepreneurs. They're the ones that do it right and they burn out, and then they're fat cats, right? And then they try a few more things and doesn't quite work out, and they relive the glory days, right? And then the guys that really get to that upper echelon are the ones that say, how did I do it? It's that battle scar. How did I get it done there? What did I do wrong? And they attack the next hill. It's all about that. So I would just say, you know what? You gotta live a fierce life. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you need to be able to take a punch in the face and move forward with a smile. All right, guys, I appreciate you guys hopping on. This is Chris Jones and Shane Hall with Urban Link Media. We run a digital marketing and advertising agency along with a publication called Urban Link Magazine. You can find this on the Urban Link Magazine with much more. If you have any interest in checking us out, please do so. I appreciate you hopping on.
I'm ready to play now. Put me in the game now. I came here to prove it. I'm ready to do it. I can't be afraid.